So the number one question you want to know, how do you win your fantasy football league? Well, it's dead simple. You take the number one value in each round. But of course, the hard part is identifying who those values are. But I've actually already done that for you. Let me explain. If you have an early pick in your draft, prioritize the wide receiver position, the studs. Take these guys over Christian McCaffrey's and over the Austin Eckler's. But if you're in the middle or end of the first round, we'll start with Saquon Barkley. Barkley currently goes as the 12th pick, the last pick in the first round, and he's a top 8 player for me. Look, this guy is one of the few workhorse running backs left. Last year, he had an 80% opportunity share, one of 3 running backs to do that. His snap share at 80% was basically tied with Alvin Kamara for the league lead. And last year, he played in 16 games, proving that he's not injury prone and it was just some bad luck the previous years. And he set a lot of new career highs last year. In touches with 352, in rushing yards with over 1,300, and his route participation was 60%. That means he was out there running around on 60% of the offensive plays, so the new head coach Brian Daboll got him involved in the passing game. But it wasn't just the passing game that Daboll improved, because in his first year as head coach, he got the Giants to be a top 10 rush offense, which of course helped Saquon. And there's a good chance we'll be seeing more touchdowns this year from the Giants because their skill positions have improved. The biggest improvement was going out there and trading for Darren Waller. Didn't have to give up a ton for him. He's probably their de facto number 1 receiver. But they also went out there and signed and re-signed a bunch of guys. They signed Paris Campbell, Jamison Crowder. They drafted and then obviously signed Jalen Hyatt, the rookie out of Tennessee, and Darius Slayton. They give the biggest contract out of any of these guys. They brought him back. And Daniel Jones hit career highs in his first year with new head coach Brian Daboll, similar to what Josh Allen did when Daboll was in Buffalo. Believe it or not, this guy Daniel Jones last year ranked 1st overall in true completion percentage and was top 5 in accuracy no matter the situation. If he was under pressure, a clean pocket, red zone, he was top 5 in overall accuracy. That seems crazy, but it's not the only career highs he hit under Daboll. He was top 10 in quarterback passer rating, up there with the best guys in the league, and he hit a career high in efficiency, about 7 yards per attempt. This all makes Saquon Barkley the best first-round pick outside of those elite receivers to start the draft. And speaking of elite receivers, the best second-round pick is Amon-Ra St. Brown, who currently goes as the wide receiver 10. Somehow, this is wrong in my opinion, and the 16th overall player. But as you can see from my rankings and projections from the Fantasy Blueprint, he's a top 10 player for me. Amon-Ra is my number 9 overall player. I think he's worth taking right after the Cooper Kupps and Stephon Diggs, and even ahead of Adams and CeeDee Lamb. Look, it all started in his rookie year. His final 6 games, his target column right here, he had 10 plus targets in all of these games, and when you look at his fantasy points in these final 6 games, he averaged 25.2 points during that time, meaning that only Cooper Kupp had more points than Amon-Ra during that time in 2021. However, a lot of people started to come out and say, oh, it was because DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson were injured. Well, Amon-Ra's 2022 put that to rest, because in 2022, he was 3rd in the NFL, up there with basically guys like Justin Jefferson and Devontae Adams only, at earning targets per route run. On a third of his routes, 32.3%. This is elite. And he was the 3rd best wide receiver at getting open against man in zone coverage, which proves that he knows how to get open. In 2021 wasn't a fluke. So last year, he's actually a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy points per game. However, this number is skewed because look at his injuries last year. He had an ankle injury that ended up getting re-aggravated. He ended up leaving or missing 4 total games. And when you leave a game early, it'll skew your fantasy points per game since you couldn't finish it. Amon-Ra actually would have finished 5th last year in wide receiver fantasy points per game, only behind Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, and Tyreek Hill. That's how good he was last year. And now for some reason, he doesn't even barely go in the top 10 at the position. The easy translation here is that in all of your drafts, be targeting Amon-Ra St. Brown in round 2. And just in general this year, the wide receiver position is going to be very valuable depending on where you start your draft. If you have an early pick, you could take 2 to 3 in a row because the running backs drop. And one of those guys that drops right now is Rhamondre Stevenson. He's being taken as a 3rd round pick, which is weird because he's quietly a fantasy cheat code workhorse running back. And now that's a mouthful, so let me break it down. Stevenson quietly has the cheat codes, meaning his running back receptions and red zone usage. He was 3rd in running back targets last year and 38 red zone carries while splitting a backfield. More than 2 per game is solid. He actually was 2nd on the team last year in target share, the amount of targets he saw percentage-wise on the team. Only Jacoby Myers had more. He did all this while playing just 60% of the snaps because Damian Harris was there. But now Damian Harris is gone, and this is what he's done in 8 games in his career without Harris. He averages 15.1 fantasy points. When you combined his opportunities, targets, and rush attempts, 18.2, and his total yardage, 82.1 per game. The translation here is that all of these metrics would have ranked top 10 at the running back position last year, and now he has less competition. Because with Harris gone, these are the guys behind him. You have James Robinson, who was acquired this offseason, but is a statistically worse rusher than Damian Harris. And then there's Pierre Strong, who's a 2nd-year player. He's a talented running back, but he just lacks experience, and he's not much of a fit with the downhill running style of the Patriots scheme. So simply put, take Rhamondre Stevenson in round 3. Right now in the Fantasy Blueprint, which you can get linked down below if you want to to win your league this year. He's my 21st overall player. I have a second round value on him. All right, now let's hop back to the wide receiver position for a guy who you might not think I'm going to say here, but I'm gonna. And that would be DeAndre Hopkins, who currently goes off the board in the 4th round as the wide receiver 19, but I have him as a 3rd round pick, my 33rd overall player. So if you haven't yet seen the news, well, DeAndre Hopkins is a free agent, which creates sort of a mystery here, but his stock is only going to be on the rise since he's leaving Arizona. Because the Cardinals this year are projected to win just 4.5 games, which is the fewest on the year, and they're actually projected by Vegas to also score the fewest points, which makes sense. So literally any other offense is a boost to the stock of Hopkins, and he actually gets to choose where he goes. So far, he stated that he wants to join a contender with good management and has hinted at the Bills and Chiefs. Now, I know what you might be thinking. DeAndre Hopkins, oh, he's over the hill. He's 31 years old. He was 30 last year. Well, despite this age, nothing dropped off in 2022. That's right. Hopkins was still a stud last year. He was 8th in target rate, his ability to earn targets per route, and he averaged 10.7 targets per game. He also had the 2nd best win rate versus man coverage. Amon-Ra was 3rd in this metric, so that's how good he was. And look, Hopkins knows this. The tweet that I put out about some of these metrics, he ends up retweeting it sarcastically and saying, "Shh, I'm old and can't get open." I think he has a little bit more juice left in him, and even a chip on his shoulder, as you can see here, heading into 2023. So take Hopkins, because the second he joins a decent offense or a great one like the Bills or Chiefs, he'll probably become a 3rd round pick. All right, next man up in the 5th round is Christian Watson, who I have a 4th round grade on, the Packers receiver. Look, not a lot of people remember this, but Watson was battling so many injuries to start last year. I mean, check this out. In rookie minicamp in June, he had a knee tear and had to get surgery, which is valuable time that he missed with his quarterback getting reps in rookie minicamp. And then in September, just about a week into the season, he ends up having a hamstring injury that he re-aggravates, ends up missing a couple weeks, and he's not really 100% until midseason. But oh, once that midseason happened, he took off. Because let's remember, Christian Watson's athleticism, as you can see right here on Player Profiler's workout metrics, the 3rd best to ever attend the combine. Only Calvin Johnson and Julio Jones were better. And once he was able to step on the field in week 10 against the Dallas Cowboys, his first full game back from that hamstring injury, 4 catches, 3 touchdowns, over 100 yards. He had a 40% target share, the most of any Packers receiver last year in this game. Because from week 10 on, when he was actually healthy last year, he was the number 7 fantasy receiver, right next to Amon-Ra and AJ Brown, and ahead of Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs. So the fact that he goes as the wide receiver 20 now in drafts is just a mistake, and there's a big reason for this. His quarterback is now Jordan Love, but the market is overweighting this. Based on where he goes, they're assuming that Love is going to be a bottom 3 quarterback in the NFL. He might be, but there's a better chance that he's just average to even slightly below average based off of the information we have. He's a 1st round pick, he's big and athletic, and he has been efficient in his limited regular season and preseason appearances. Watson should be a 4th round pick, and he's not that right now, so take him in round 5. And then draft this stud who falls to the 6th round, even though I actually have a 4th round grade on him, kind of an early 4th round grade as well, in Chris Godwin. Look, I know Tom Brady isn't there anymore, and Baker Mayfield is now his quarterback, but I have just one big question. Why does a guy like Drake London go in the 4th round of fantasy drafts, even though his quarterback is Desmond Ridder? Are we really sure Ridder is that much better than Baker Mayfield? Because it's surely not based off of talent, because Godwin last year was still great. Top 10 in targets, despite missing 2 games, averaging 9.5 per game. And he was 15th versus man coverage and 6th in yards after the catch. These stats don't rely on your quarterback. And believe it or not, we've touched on this in the past, but Baker may actually be a good fit for him, because Baker Mayfield's slot wide receivers average 4 more fantasy points per game than outside receivers, and Godwin last year was tied with Christian Kirk for the most slot receiver receptions at 74. So as you can see right here in the DFS blueprint, I have Godwin as my 41st overall player, meaning that he's a 4th round pick. I have him next to guys like Deebo Samuel, yet he goes in the 6th round, so take him as a major value. So Godwin is a great value, but this next guy's the number 1 value, not just in the 7th round, but the entire fantasy football draft. And that would be Deontae Johnson, who right now currently goes as the wide receiver 36, the 77th overall player in round 7. I have him as a 5th round grade. And I'm really confused on how he goes after guys like Jordan Addison, the rookie from Minnesota, Jackson Smith-Njigba out of Seattle, and even his own teammate George Pickens. Look, I think Jordan Addison is great. An amazing route runner, will be an awesome slot wide receiver for Kirk Cousins, but there's no denying the fact that he's behind Justin Jefferson, who saw a 30% target share last year, and will be competing with TJ Hawkinson, who saw over a 25% target share during his time with the Vikings. Then you have Jackson Smith-Njigba, who was the first wide receiver taken in the draft. I think he's fantastic, but for this year, he's going to be behind DK and Tyler Lockett to at least start the season. Pickens is often taken ahead of Deontay Johnson, his teammate, and I was a big proponent of Pickens last year in the draft process. But there's no denying the fact that Pickens wasn't that great last year. He was 87th at earning targets, despite Kenny Pickett being pretty dang efficient, especially downfield. The truth is, Deontay Johnson is still just 26 years old. He's in his prime. He had 147 targets last year, and he's now had 3 straight years of 140 plus targets. That's alpha number 1 wide receiver material. And plenty of things were great for Deontay Deontae last year. He was top 20 at earning targets per route. He was 10th versus man coverage, and he had the 4th most missed tackles forced. The problem with his season was that he was unlucky with just 0 touchdowns, and he had career low yards after the catch based on the scheme that he was in. But the good news is his scheme is going to be different this year because they have a new offensive coordinator, thankfully. And as the fantasy blueprint shows right here, Deontay Johnson is my 53rd ranked wide receiver. I'm 20 spots ahead of ADP, the average draft position, meaning that I think he's 2 rounds better than where he goes, making him a major value. Now, those rankings in top 255s are just a small part of the fantasy blueprint. And if you'd like to win your fantasy league and smack around your friends this year, well, this is going to be the tool for you. It has everything you need to do just that. Just click the link in the description below and follow the 2 simple steps to get your fantasy blueprint today. And if for some reason you don't make your fantasy playoffs, I'll refund your payment of $5 to $10 depending on when you're watching this for the fantasy blueprint. You get to use it for the draft and every week during the season with rankings and all the tools you need up until your fantasy championship for just $5 to $10. All right, so get your fantasy blueprint down below. Now, the next man up is Brian Robinson. He is the best 8th round pick and a guy you want to be getting there, an unbelievable running back value at this point. He goes around guys like Kirk Cousins and Pat Freiermuth. I'll take Robinson at this point. And we can leverage that blueprint again because Robinson currently goes as the 104th player off the board, but he's my 85th. So I'm about 20 spots ahead of ADP. He's a big value. Now, in this range of the 8th round, sometimes I'll go a wide receiver here, but since we already took 4 wide receivers in a row up until this point, for the optimal strategy, running back is the move. And last year, Robinson had won his job to start the year as a rookie, but then he ends up getting shot in the knee, so he misses some time. Of course, thankfully, he was okay. Once he came back, oh boy, did he start to go off. He averaged, as a rookie last year, over 17 opportunities per game between his carries and his targets, 18.1 to be exact. And he ended the season strong, commanding even more of the workload, seeing 23 plus opportunities in the final 2 games. And now his competition isn't going to be anything all that different. I think Antonio Gibson is a fine fantasy pick based on where he goes as well, but he already beat him out last year. And then there's Chris Rodriguez, a 6th round rookie. Worth noting that JD McKissic is also no longer with the team, so there's nothing too alarming in this backfield to think that Robinson isn't going to get good volume again. So take Robinson in round 8 and then take the best 9th round pick right here in Brandin Cooks, who currently goes as the wide receiver 43 in round 9, and I have a 7th round value on him. Look, things weren't great last year. Cooks' wide receiver efficiency, his yards per route run, he was ranked 43rd in the league, which is a 17% efficiency drop for him. But it's hard to fully blame Cooks. He was in the worst offense last year in terms of efficiency, and his quarterback Davis Mills ranked 33rd out of 32 NFL starting quarterbacks, 33rd in accuracy, which led to Cooks seeing just a 68% catchable target rate, meaning that 32% of his targets weren't even catchable, 84th worst in the league. But now Cooks is going to join the Cowboys, where Dak, even though he battled injuries last year, was still top 12 in accuracy and efficiency last year. And now Cooks is going to be the wide receiver 2 behind Lamb, so don't expect a 133 target year like he had in 2021, but you're not paying for that in round 9. After all, he is the 43rd wide receiver off the board, even though he finished better than that last year in a worse offense while only scoring 3 touchdowns. And now his competition outside of Lamb isn't all that much. Dalton Schultz and Noah Brown are gone, and his biggest threat as wide receiver 2 is Michael Gallup, who's been an inefficient field stretcher for the past few years. Expect Cooks to have about 100 targets, 5 touchdowns or so, and finish as a top 35 guy, the best value in round 9. Now, I drafted this exact team that we're talking about, and I did it on Underdog Fantasy with $15 million in prizes. And check this out, the biggest contest ever, $3 million to first place. You could be drafting right now at 30 seconds per pick or an 8-hour slow draft per pick. Just click the link in the description below and you'll get a deposit bonus when you use the code SAL. So if you put in 25, they'll give you 25 right back, meaning you'll have 2 shots at the $3 million at least. So click the link below to sign up for Underdog Fantasy and start drafting for those millions of dollars today. And then the best value in round 10, this may change depending on when you were watching this, but as of right now, it's Samaje Perine, who currently goes in the 10th round as the running back 34, and I have an 8th round projection on him in the blueprint. If you're not familiar, Samaje Perine, as it stands right now, is the #1 running back in Denver because Javonte Williams had a multi-ligament knee tear last year, which is usually a 15-month recovery, meaning that he might not be 100% until December. And SportsMD analysis echoes some of this, saying that he's not going to be playing in week 1, Javonte. It's going to be a 15-month recovery, and you're probably not going to expect this stud performance until late 2023. So because of this, the Broncos signed Samaje Perine to a 2-year deal worth $7.5 million, more than the average backup, probably showing that he's going to get more work, maybe even, as of now, the starting work. And Samaje actually started 3 games last year while Joe Mixon was shelved, and in those games, he averaged 110 yards and 21 touches while going over 17 fantasy points per game. And coaches trust him a lot because he can pass protect, and believe it or not, he hasn't fumbled since 2017. Now, of course, this can change if a veteran is added in Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, Kareem Hunt, even Dalvin Cook, depending on when you're watching this, but his current competition is Tyler Batty, who has 2 career touches, and Tony Jones, who's 90th in running back efficiency since 2020. 2020. So this is a round by round breakdown on how to win your fantasy draft, the best value in each round to target. Now, if you want to know 7 more league winners that will keep you ahead of your buddies, giving you the best chance to win, well, check out this video right here. And before you go, if you found this helpful, be sure to hit the subscribe button for even more content to help you win your league.